Hello, hello, and welcome to our inverse series of, get to know the founder. And today we're joined by Tim Routledge. Tim works in the stress saving industry, which, is a significant problem affecting both individuals and organizations globally. Some online research suggests up to 16 trillion in lost productivity by 2030. I'm the CEO of Inverse Funding, and we help companies prepare for fundraising rounds, documents, outreach processes, and so forth. The purpose of today really is just to scratch under the surface of Tim and his business, understand what makes him tick, and also see if we can extract any nuggets of information that can help others out there who are potentially going through the same challenges and problems. I estimate the chat 30, 40 minutes, maybe 50 if we're having fun. And we're going to cut it up and share it across social media channels and so forth. Tim, I've seen from your personal profile that it seems like you've been an entrepreneur and founder since 1998. So my normal question of, I bet the family wasn't happy when you chucked it all in to sort of take this on isn't relevant, but I'd love to know your background and sort of how you arrived at this point, especially within sort of stress and personal well-being and corporate well-being.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it's actually 1993, Jamie. I'm even older than I look. So I've actually run 7 different businesses since then. So, but my background originally is advertising. So I was sort of classically trained in a big advertising agency in London, went through the kind of account manager process, did all that. But got to a point where I wanted to do my own thing. So I set up a couple of businesses that ran in advertising, small advertising agencies, that kind of thing. Were relatively successful with those and moved on. But then I got to a point where I wanted to understand why people don't behave the way we expect them to. And obviously a big problem in advertising. So I kind of stepped away from my job and spent a year and a half doing a whole bunch of neuroscience and psychological research into behavior, really. So why people do stuff. And then that helped me to think about a different organization that I wanted to work for, that I wanted to start, something that would investigate originally customer experiences. And I set up a business with a guy called Tim Wade, who's my co-founder of BioStress, to try and track and understand customer experiences scientifically using biometric devices. So we actually measured people physiologically while they went through experiences to try and understand where things went wrong. The theory being, obviously, if we could understand where things went wrong, we could put them right and help big organizations to deliver better customer experiences. And we work for people like Virgin Atlantic, DHL, Honda, Carphone Warehouse, a whole bunch of people like that, and did some really good work. But one of the things that became apparent really early on was that if you wanted to improve customer experiences, you nearly always had to improve employee experiences as well, because employees were almost always charged with helping in some way to deliver the customer experience. And that's where we sort of came to this point. Well, actually, perhaps there's more in the employee experiences there is in customer experiences. And if we could understand what was affecting people, we could again make it better. And that's where we settle on this idea of stress being a causal factor in a whole bunch of things, mental and physical ill health. And if we could define it, we could understand it and therefore help to manage it. And what we found was that there just isn't a objective measure of stress that exists. And while everyone thinks they know what stress is, actually the reverse is almost entirely true. Most people don't know what stress is, and they think it's just negative when actually it's not. And so they find it very difficult to manage it effectively. And that's what we thought, with a measurement tool, which we could offer in a mass way, we could improve that. And our mission is to revolutionize stress management.
It's true because, for me, stress is something, granted, not 1993. I was still watching Power Rangers then, but I've got a good 10 plus years in me now in business, and stress has always been my unique strength in a way because it's actually stress and pressure that makes me get up at 8 a.m. in the morning and get on with my day. If I didn't have stress, I think I'd be quite a lazy person, actually.
I think that's absolutely true, and I mean, in fact, scientifically, you literally wouldn't get out of bed in the morning if you didn't have stress, because it's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. You put a huge stress on your body just waking up and getting up. So it's integral for us as human beings to achieve anything. We couldn't pass an exam. We couldn't be successful. We couldn't ask someone that difficult question about whether they want to go out with us. We couldn't achieve anything without stress. So the key is managing it, not the fact that it exists. Whereas normally when you talk to people about it, they'll say, "Oh, I'm terribly stressed," and their reaction to it will be entirely negative. Whereas, obviously, it's a very positive force in helping humans to achieve stuff. So it just needs to be understood better, and that is also part of the key. To have a measure of it gives you the opportunity to do something about it and to see how you're tackling it and improving your management of it.
Got it. So in your context, obviously the business is called BioStress, and the problem, what is that core problem that you're looking to sort of solve?
Well, I guess the core problem is the fact that this measure of stress doesn't exist, and yet it's despite the fact that we all understand that stress is an issue and a problem. And as you highlighted, some very scary numbers about how it's getting worse and worse as we move on. The numbers don't improve year on year. Everyone seems to talk about it, but no one seems to be able to address it. And this to us seems to be the key problem. If you've got to start with a measure, because then you can see where you are. You've got to benchmark where you are. You can improve things, and then you can look to optimize them by continuing this measurement. And that's the BIO of bio, which is why we get to BioStress. So benchmark, improve, and optimize.
Awesome. I saw from your history, it seems like you went back to uni and studied neuroscience along the way. Have individuals or mentors or business partners inspired that journey? How did that happen?
I think it was always something because since the time that I sort of stepped away to sort of study those things, I wanted to, I guess, have a formal qualification, a formal education to sort of show that the knowledge I had was formalized in some way. So I always wanted to do it. And I met some inspiring people along the way who were actually on that course who kind of encouraged me to kind of stick with it and get out the other end. So, yeah, it's just been always something in my mind that I think somebody said to me years ago that you're more a scientist than an advertiser, when I was working in advertising, which I guess has always stuck with me and something that I wanted to sort of demonstrate.
It's a fine line, and it's an interesting one we've gone through here. Because in particular with investment, I know not necessarily relevant, but the FCA deems regulations should be enforced if someone like myself uses their expertise to coerce an investor into making an investment. And that can mean simple things like writing a compelling pitch deck because I know the narratives that are going to make someone else part with their cash. And I think you're right, science and marketing and advertising are so closely linked because it's all about I'm going to do this output and it's going to trigger something in someone else. So yeah, I think that's very relevant for sure. Can you give us an overview then of BioStress, including the products and services that you offer, and ultimately who is the target market? Because I'm presuming it's not, your one, single founder businesses. It's a bit bigger than that.
Yeah, and I think the idea of coming up with, what we believe to be the world's most accurate objective measure of stress is our key founding product, if you like, because having got this measure, we believe it's applicable in lots of different areas. You could see how it could be embedded in your next generation of consumer wearable, where it becomes the stress application that you run on your watch, and it tells you more accurately about your stress. You could see how it could be used in healthcare and healthcare research to understand biomarkers for stress, identify people in advance of them having problems, because stress only tends to manifest itself as a big problem when you're burnt out at the end of the process. Whereas if we could identify people's poor stress management much earlier, we have this chance to move healthcare from kind of treatment, which is where it is now, to prevention by stopping people from getting sick, both mentally and physically, because stress is such a core element in these diseases. So I think that's our kind of big product, is this measure of stress. But obviously, we need to have an application somewhere to demonstrate its efficacy. And our first application is in workplace stress, as you sort of identified. It's the idea that large organizations need to understand the levels of stress within their business so that they can manage that effectively, to be more productive, to be commercially more successful, but also because they should care about the well-being of their employees, because the two things are inextricably linked. There's a moral responsibility to make your people feel as good as they can, but then you have a commercial responsibility to make money. So the two things actually, if you could work to get them in parallel, would give you the output that you need. So our first product is a workplace well-being improvement system. And we call it a system because it's based on a digital platform and there's obviously an app. And what we do is benchmark employees so that on an individual level, they get a report about their own stress and well-being and what they can do to improve it. So everybody benefits there, but also by aggregating that data together, anonymized and hugely confidential so that nobody can actually see anybody's individual data, the employer can get this sense of collectively as a group, how is a team in accounts versus a team in sales versus a team in retail on the floor, so retail shop floor, as it were, how are they coping with stress? How can we better change our systems, change our working practices, change our environments in order to make those people less negatively stressed and to enhance the positive aspects of stress? Because we found some really interesting things about the difference between people in sales need stress to succeed. People in, for example, customer services need less stress to succeed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, absolutely. And I think with this stuff, obviously, you're not going to plug into someone's head. So I think the skepticism from perhaps someone out from the outside looking in would come down to that capture. So how exactly is it that you capture stress levels?
Yeah, so there's two elements we use. One is we ask people questions about their stress. What do they think stresses them and how stressed do they think they are? So we call these psychometric tests to understand where people's perceived stress is. And then we monitor people. So we get people to wear a wearable. It's just a very simple device like this. It's a pretty dumb device, doesn't have a screen or anything. They wear this for 7 days, 24/7, so night and day. And then we amalgamate all that data together, both the self-report, the psychometric data, and the physiological data, and we present a report to that individual to show them where they are, this benchmark position. This is where you are now in terms of how stress is affecting you. We talk about people's sleep, we talk about their activity levels, we talk about their stress and recovery, and give them a program, an individual program based on their own data, which says, here are the things that you need to work on. It's a self-improvement program delivered by the app that they can respond to the level that they want to. And our experience is that everybody knows that they should be doing something about a bunch of things, right? Their activity, that we all know we should sleep better, but we don't do anything about it. But this data provides the catalyst for people to change because it is them at a moment in time. No one's arguing with it, about stuff. It's just like, this is you now, and here are some things you can do to make yourself better. And what we find is the majority of people, when presented with that report, it's the active thing which makes them do something about it. So it's this catalyst for change.
Yeah, I mean, from my own perspective, as you say, there's 100% things I could change, and I'm mindfully aware of that. But I guess the thing is, well, what's the outcome on the other side, and is it worth it? Because last night I went to bed at 1 a.m. and I thought, oh, it's a bit late. However, I did some good stuff, in that time, and I enjoyed myself, and I managed to switch off from work, which is difficult. So, not difficult because it's like difficult because I enjoy it. It's difficult to switch off because I'm doing stuff I enjoy. So, I got some good results, and I switched off and had some fun, watched some cool stuff, and I wonder how much of a benefit that is to me because I enjoyed my evening versus just getting an extra hour's sleep. So. I'd love to know that in the future.
Yeah, I think, and actually that's what this kind of a measurement would give you. You could see the opportunity. It's all about balance, obviously. It's about this, you can do the things you want to do, you can cope with stress, but it takes a certain amount of resource, individual resource, physical and mental resource, and you've got to make that up somewhere. So if you want to, this whole idea about, some of these aphorisms are there for a reason, like burning the candle at both ends is hard to do. Your body can't cope with it. But if you understand where you might need to put the flame out on one side so you can burn brighter on the other, if that makes sense, then this is what a stress measurement can do. Because the truth is we can't, by definition, stress is a surprising pressure on our bodies. That's what stress is. So we can't know what's going to stress us because by definition, it's a surprise. So all we can do is build our ability to cope with it. So our resilience, as we call it. And that's the key here is this sleep, this activity, improved diet, understanding stress better, managing yourself from a mental perspective, having a stronger mindset, a growth mindset. All these things can make a difference and make it more likely that when something comes along which is stressful, you can cope with it. And you can stay up till 1 o'clock and you can work yourself very hard and all these things. You can do that because you've built the resilience to cope with it. And you understand that somewhere down the line, you've got to have an extra hour sleep or even a 20-minute nap or whatever it is to make up for those resources that you've kind of burnt in putting yourself under pressure.
I think if you put this in front of, say, the top 100 largest employees in the UK, and you sat them down with the top person and explained exactly this, and this is what we want to do, and this is what we want to measure, on an exit poll, you'd probably have 100% in terms of, yeah, it's a good idea, and we would use it. Obviously, business and life isn't that simple, unfortunately.
If only.
Yeah. So, how's your traction been? Growth? What are you proud of that you've achieved so far?
Yeah, it's and you won't be surprised to hear, Jamie, it's been tough because whereas it's easy to get interest, as you said, most people would say, yeah, of course, be interested. Everyone, what's the ROI? Why should we do it? What's the value of this product? And that's the thing we've been demonstrating that's kind of different about us and from, I guess, our competitors, is that we also measure kind of output in a commercial sense so that we can see how stress is actually affecting someone's individual performance and obviously as a group, how that's affecting the performance of a business. So I think we're able to show for the CEOs that we might sit down with, those 100 CEOs and who say, yeah, I love it. We could say to them, and your chief finance officer is going to love it too, because we can show you how the investment you make in the BioStress program will deliver huge multiples in terms of reducing your sickness absence cost, retaining your staff for much longer periods of time because they're engaged in the business and it's not stressing them as much. And also in terms of some positive metrics like sales, profit, those kind of things, customer satisfaction. We've seen all those things before. So we've done a series of trials to kind of, obviously we need to demonstrate the efficacy of the product. We've worked with Bupa in the UK to sort of demonstrate the early MVP of the system. And it worked very, very well. So that's been our trial basis that we've now built a more refined platform and an app that goes with it that can ingest data from all these multiple sources, process it using our algorithm, output the stress metric. And where we are now is just starting to sign up our first kind of commercial clients. So we've got 3 now, very exciting. We signed one earlier this week. So we've got 3 clients who are starting in Q2 and a whole bunch of others in our pipeline, which is the graft bit, which there's the graft bit, trying to build that pipeline of people to take it on board, to try it, and so we can expand the users within those client bases. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic certainly was many things, but it was definitely an accelerator for wellness businesses, I believe. I personally saw, a huge amount of deal flow come through sort of B2B wellness. So do you think it's a saturated market? Are you finding it difficult to stand out? Do you feel like you've got a competitive advantage?
Yeah, I guess we think all those things that we definitely have an advantage. We believe we stand out because we are unique in the fact of comparing these different metrics together, and say this fact that we've got this, what we call the most accurate objective measure is something which makes it different from us. I think the problem that all businesses have at the moment is trying to measure something which is currently not measurable. So I was reading some stuff about the 4-day week, for example, just the other day, and reading a bunch of sort of to's and fro's on LinkedIn and social media stuff about, does the 4-day week produce better results or worse results? And you could know that if you're using BioStress, because you could see the effects of it has both on the well-being of people, the stress levels that they're experiencing, and their output. So I think in terms of those kind of things and home versus office working and which is more stressful, but which is more productively stressful. So back to our point about what's positive and what's negative. And we did some interesting work like that with Bupa, where we did do some trials on people who are working exclusively from home, those who are working some in office, some in home, and some who are working exclusively in the office. And there's some very interesting differences. To be honest, we need more people, more data to be able to produce something concrete on that. But there's certainly some interesting trends that you see there in the way stress affects people in a very different way when they're at home to when they're at work.
I was reading at the weekend that data sets, especially complex data sets like you're collecting, are going to be the only thing that AI can't replace. It's got everything else. Are you going to look to commercialize those in the future, or how do you see the data roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a kind of key part of it in terms of this. Every person who goes through BioStress contributes to our data set. And the more people we have, the more that data set is predictive in terms of being able to identify the effect of stress on longer term illness, on particular social democratic factors, on health factors as well. So we believe that this data set, as it grows, will be hugely important to health researchers, and indeed something that we can market separately, as well as the products on the kind of front end, as it were. The back end data set itself is something that people will want to mine to understand how stress is impacting people's lives.
100%. And just to be clear, as you said, like Janine from XYZ company or whoever sitting there, as a business owner, you wouldn't have an alert saying this person's stressed. They would get that alert, and you would have like an overall corporate score that would probably reflect the fact that, hey, people are getting stressed out here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's a purely voluntary program. So people have to volunteer to be on the program. And part of the reason they do that is because they know that their data is completely confidential. It's interesting. We have had a number of inquiries from businesses who want specifically to know who's stressed in their business. And that's not what it's about. It's about helping individuals and then collectively the group, because individuals get better, collectively the group to be better, to more able to cope with their stress. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's about your control over your own data and your control over your own lifestyle, which affects your stress effects, how stress affects you. And then it's about collectively putting that data together and anonymizing it and aggregating it so a business can start to see where it may be putting unnecessary stress on people and where it can address things within the system, which might be technology, it might be working environments, it might be the 4-day week or working from home. They can change these working practices to put less stress on their employees, which makes it more likely that they will be able to manage that stress successfully. Does that make sense? Does it?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess, I know there's people on my team who would definitely be stressed out if they thought that I was trying to manage their stress individually.
Yeah, of course.
It would drive a whole other complex set of emotions and challenges. So I think that's very relevant. Obviously, I'm a fundraising guy. I love fundraising. I've had my own weird and wonderful journey with fundraising. And as someone who's been in business since 1993, Space Jam era, you've obviously had experiences with fundraising. So, how's it been? And I guess in particular with BioStress, what are you learning?
I think we're learning that, I think two main things. One, you got to do your homework, and the other one that you got to be prepared for the long haul, as it were. You've got to hang in there because it is about kind of making sure you've done things right, but at the same time being prepared to kind of fight your corner and talk to a lot of people, kiss a lot of frogs. I think, as someone said to me the other day, you have to kiss a lot of frogs. So with BioStress, we've been very lucky. We have applied for various grants, and we're lucky enough to be awarded an Innovate UK grant early last year, 22. And then we raised some angel funding on the back of that to match that grant. And that's what we've been using so far to obviously support the build of our platform and the development of the business so far. And more recently, we've been awarded another Innovate UK grant, which is 3 times bigger, which is very exciting. And again, we're now looking to kind of raise match funding for that to get ourselves to the point where we can carry out these much more detailed in-market trials and get a bigger data set, as the data set we were just talking about, to be more and more confident of the algorithm we've developed to kind of test it to destruction, if you like, with more machine learning, so we understand its output better. And then that's what we can apply to our regular clients and obviously to rapidly scale the business from that point. So that's where we're at right now.
And what do you think, off topic, but what do you think about the criticism of grant funding, that it basically encourages research projects, or do you feel like you've got that commercial edge nailed?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think, and again, this is maybe something that I've learned. It'd be my belief that once you get awarded a grant and knowing what you have to go through to get an Innovate grant, and they don't just hand them out, right? It's quite a hard process. I'm looking at the 26-page document I've got here that we filled in. It's just
it's a competition at the end of the day,
sure,
and you have to
absolutely
win it, and you have to be good to win it. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that we had expected to that it would be a bit, maybe naively, a bit easier once you had that to be able to go and say, hey, we've got this money already. It's kind of like free money. We just need you to kind of, to invest alongside it. And that hasn't necessarily been the case. You've still got to make the same arguments and prove the way with investors. Although I did sit down at a meeting a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of investors, all VCs, and I said, look, we've got a grant. Does that make it easier for us to raise money? And they said, oh, yeah, of course it does. And I said, well, why haven't I seen that?
Yeah,
So
it's always easy as long as it's not your business that has to do the fundraising. I mean, it's
yeah,
practically impossible. So obviously you said with the current fundraising round, the idea is, as you say, to take the product to the next level. What I guess once you get there, is it just, as you mentioned, that hard graft on, building the sales pipeline? Is that real next big drive for you?
I think that's on the workplace wellbeing side, absolutely, because I think one of the other core things we've learned is that it takes a very, very, very long time to break down a big corporate in terms of the sale. So much longer than we had predicted from initial interest. When you see the CEO at a conference and he says, "This is great, we want it in our business," to actually turning that into a kind of a live project, it's a very long time. And so we want to accelerate that, obviously, and we need more people out, boots on the ground, as it were, people knocking on doors and talking to people about it. But also from a marketing perspective, we need to take the trials that we're doing, which to take the so successful case studies and use them as ways of opening the doors for the sales guys to come in. So there's a parallel sales and marketing function to do that here. And also, as we get more successful, we'll need more operations people, because again, we need people to actually manage clients and deal with the process. So that's our kind of what our funding is for. And it should drive itself. So as we start to scale and we start to obviously bring in more revenue, we won't need so much investment in the future, because we believe we can be profitable in 2024.
We often see with fundraising that people just shoot off in one direction, whether it's technology and they want to sink £500,000 into tech, or if it's just user AC and that's what they're going after. But it seems like with this one, you're wanting everything to just level at the same time. Is that something you've learned from experience?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it is about sort of it's about playing the field. That's a terrible thing to say, playing the field, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
to, as broadly as possible, try to make sure that we're covering the ground. So we know that we have a product that we can sell currently, and it will only get better because we're selling it, so people are buying it. And we want to develop that and push that route forward with the sales and marketing side. But at the same time, we've got this £500,000 from Innovate UK, which will allow us to pay for the trials we want to do, where we can be very rigorous in terms of the way that we run those trials, to understand very clearly scientifically what's happening and what's not happening with the stress algorithm that we've got, and how do we turn that into a better product, both for the workplace well-being iteration of it, and also refine it so that we can go to someone like Google and Apple and say, you really need this algorithm in your next device because it's the best stress measurement device in the world.
And Google are trying, and so are Apple. Apple, I think they're getting close to doing blood glucose, I believe, with diabetes, etc. And I'm sure there's markers in there that you can pull as well for stress. So I would suggest that, yeah, as you say, the big players are moving in the right direction for you.
Yeah, it seems to be as obviously health becomes more individual, and that's certainly a move. And there's lots of manufacturers making devices more sophisticated than Apple and Fitbit, who want to create patient monitoring devices, so that potentially in the future we'll go into hospital, and as we come out in our recovery, we'll be wearing a device all the time, and our consultant will be able to track us. Whatever you think about that, might be good and it might be bad.
I worked on a care project, and the money that the NHS spends on people getting booked, having to go back into hospital with only a couple of days of discharge, and then they lose all of this. It's so complex and so deep that it does make sense. You've obviously got a good barometer, as I say. You've been in business a while. How does this feel compared to other stuff that you've worked on and you've had successes on? The word that I hate to use, but it's true. Unicorn. If you crack this, you are describing a unicorn. It would be that big. So, how does it feel from where you are and your future aspirations and, the big picture stuff? Does it all feel there?
Yeah, it feels exactly that, Jamie. It feels like for the first time, the things that I've done before have tended to be fairly sort of, low key lifestyle businesses, something to build, but based around a consultancy model where it's kind of my expertise that someone was buying. Whereas this feels, and we designed it to be a SaaS style business that where someone's contracted on a monthly basis to use our system, run our app through their smartphone, and get their stress data and act on it. And that's why we feel it's kind of eminently scalable and is something that, in the future, we want to be ubiquitous. We want everyone. We talk about the Strava of stress. We want BioStress to be the Strava of stress, which is whenever people talk about stress, they talk about their BioStress levels because they use our system in some way, shape or form, whether it be at work, whether it be themselves and their own wearable, whatever it is. And I don't think there's any reason to think that can't be achieved. It's something that would be that's critical for at the moment within the workplace environment, because understanding stress and how to tackle it ticks the box of well-being for businesses, but also ticks this other box of commercial success, productivity, because we know that there's a straight line link between people's ability to cope with stress and their ability to be engaged at work. And the more engaged people are, the evidence is the more productive they are, the longer they stay, the less they're off sick, all those kind of costs are reduced. So, our aspiration is kind of to launch into the US healthcare market. And obviously in private healthcare aspects, there's far more opportunity and there's huge amounts of cash. Scary. We've been talking to some healthcare investors in the US, and the amount of money that's spent on healthcare in the US, through employee assistance programs and through health insurance companies, that's where we see this kind of the ultimate application of BioStress in setting, for example, insurance premiums, assessing a business for those kind of things, but assessing a business for risk in terms of insurance by understanding its BioStress profile. We ultimately see the opportunity for BioStress indexes to be quoted on the stock exchange as a reason to see for investment in business, for its performance amongst the FTSE 100, that kind of stuff, because it's so critical, it's so related to commercial performance, and understanding it would show that a business has, taken that ultimate step.
I think that's wise. It makes a lot of sense as well. Is the plan that you get a big enough data set for benchmarking that you can then move into the individuals like myself on the B2C side, or are you always sticking with B2B?
No, I think, as you say, the opportunity is when there is a critical mass for the data set when it becomes predictive. When with machine learning and obviously AI principles applied to it, we will be able to see under an 80-20 rule how most people can be helped, and how most people fall into these categories. But also we can identify people on the edges in that 20% who need extra care. And at the moment, as you know, care is not applied accurately to the people that really need it, because there are so many people who don't understand. We don't understand enough about their mental or physical conditions. And we think the BioStress database will be able to do that. We'll be able to dice and slice it to help people. For example, we're talking to a group about menopausal women and how they're particularly affected by stress, and how we can use BioStress to identify those particular issues and address them before they need to be treated. So as a prevention tool, how do we help people who are perimenopausal before they get into the menopausal stage in order to address that condition with some lifestyle factors which could make a big difference?
Yep, it makes a lot of sense. And like I said, for you to put the device on me and I'm going through your app and saying, okay, I work remotely. So you're like, okay, I go in that bucket, and then you get my steps data and you see I'm semi-active and you see I'm not sleeping maybe as much as I should. It makes sense with a large enough database. You can put me in a pretty accurate bucket for where my stress levels are going to be, and then you can help me work on it. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's obviously, as you say, the bigger the data set, the more defined and the more refined we can be, even to this point of identifying, earlier biomarkers. So is there something that tells us about the way people from their first or second jobs, in their sort of early 20s through to 30, what does that stress in that environment and during that period tell us about their propensity for cardiovascular disease in their 40s? Because we know there's a direct link between stress and cardiovascular disease and diabetes and some cancers and a whole bunch of even musculoskeletal problems are exacerbated if you are poorly able to manage stress from a mental perspective, because it means you feel the pain more acutely, right? So all these things can be used to help, as I say, move healthcare into prevention from treatment.
Has anything surprised you about how hard it's been in getting this one off the ground?
Why don't other people see it, James?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
because in a way, it's exactly what you said at the beginning is really interesting. This sit 100 people down who run big companies, who've got a lot of people in. You tell them a story, they go, "This is great." But I think just like everything else, getting it over the line, getting the fine tuning it, the go-to-market strategy, making the product market fit, making that as accurate as it can be. And clearly, we haven't quite got that yet, because otherwise people would be falling over themselves. But we believe with the case studies that we're going to generate and more of a marketing and sales focus, that we will be able to get more people to know about the issue and the solution and be able to therefore kind of buy it. I think that's my slight frustration, is that I don't see why people don't see it.
I think that's
that's
universal. That's universal. I mean, even on our own business with our own products, I mean, which is infinitely less complex than yours. Every day's a fiddle, to try and get it going. And again, I'm sitting there thinking, God, this is a no-brainer. Why wouldn't every person, every business in the world use this? But again, it isn't that simple. Do you have advice for other entrepreneurs who are going through that process of tweaking and fiddling and?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I learned late, probably too late, and only really in the last two businesses I've run, is that I have a co-founder, Tim Wade, who it makes all the difference having someone who you can completely trust, who's on the same level as you, who understands, who's prepared to graft as hard as you are, and all those kind of things. It makes a massive difference. Massive difference. I can't overemphasize that enough, that having someone to share the load with is massive, is huge, in terms of the help it can give you, because there are days when you're down and days when you're up, and you help each other, and that's what you need to get through. Bounce ideas off people, someone that is completely integral to the business as well, and yeah, for me, it's been the key to pushing this forward, and the key to our success will be the fact that we're able to kind of work together to achieve it, rather than slaving away on my own.
Well, it kind of gets rid of that question as well that you always have in your head as an entrepreneur. It's like, am I the only one who thinks this is great? Having someone else there who agrees with you is pretty reassuring, for sure. Well, look, I think that's all excellent, and ultimately, it leads to the sort of final conclusion, which I guess is, you believe that you're sitting on, a potential unicorn, and everything that you see there has got the recipe for it to end that way. But you've got a sort of a hurdle to get over in the meantime, which is, I guess, pulling everything forward at the same pace. Is getting this funding round secured. So what are you looking for? Is it angels? Are you at the point now where you're ready for that? You've already got Innovate UK, so there isn't a bigger institution out there. Are you enjoying that? What's your dream sort of cap table?
Yeah, well, we have quite a few angel investors who already put some money in the business and continue to, as we're seeking funding now, continues to step up and want to invest, which is great. But I think we are ready for the kind of an institutional round, or certainly through a more of a syndicated angel SPP or something like that, SPV, sorry, that could come in with a larger chunk of money, rather than have to have like potentially 100 different angels on our cap table, to be able to have an institution which also can potentially bring some benefit in terms of support and those introductions. Because that's the other thing for us, is that we want investors who can add value to the business and want to add value to the business and want to be involved as advisors and introducers and those kind of things. So the corporate sales bit is clearly a critical piece to the workplace well-being side of things. And that would be hugely advantageous for us to be able to shortcut that process, to be able to have someone who is willing to invest and also able to open some doors for you.
100%. You know, we work on businesses where they get an investor, come in, maybe do a mediocre amount, 50K, but, you know, they've exited before and they've already done the whole Tesco thing, and, you know, they can just, you know, start to roll it out. And that it's beyond the value of any pound note that you can take in cash. So yeah, I totally feel that. And I think you're right. You know, VCs should be good at that. You know, a strong VC or a strong group of angels should be right for you. I totally agree. Great. Well, look, Tim, it's been great to chat. I'll share all of your details and how people can get in touch with you below, whether this is on LinkedIn, and I cut it up into nice little segments. I'll make sure I put something fancy there, or if it's just anywhere else, I'll make sure it's got your contact detail below. But I appreciate this session. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Jamie. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and yeah, always happy to talk about biostress.
Awesome. Cheers.